Right, evening everybody. Nice to see people in person rather than staring at a screen. It makes a very pleasant change. Am I? Yes, okay. Anexo, some of you are familiar with us, some of you aren't. So this is a quick canter through what we do and why we're good at it. And basically, as an introduction, we're a credit hire and legal services business, and we specialise in the non-fault motorist. So if somebody's involved in an accident which is not caused by them, we provide them with a replacement vehicle throughout the process of the repair of the vehicle or until they get a cheque for the value of the written off vehicle from the other side's insurance company. And we specialise in the impecunious claimant. The impecunious claimant is very straightforward. It's somebody who doesn't have any money. So it's somebody who needs a vehicle to continue their business or their lifestyle, and without being given a replacement vehicle, they're on the bus or they're taking the kids to school by walking or something. Their life is made more difficult. Because they're impecunious, that allows us to provide replacement vehicles at commercial credit hire rates, which are considerably higher than the spot rate you would get if you went into Budget or Hertz or whatever it was and hired a car from them. Why do we look at impecunious claimants, or why would they come to us? The reason for that is the impecunious claimant can't really go to their insurance company. There are three main reasons for that. Number one, they don't tick the box for no claims bonus protection. Number two, they don't tick the box for a replacement vehicle. But number three, most importantly, because they are short of cash, they want to keep their premiums as low as possible. And the easiest way of keeping your premium low is to have as high an excess on your insurance policy as possible. So that's what they go for. So if you have a vehicle that's valued at £500 and your excess is £1,000, there's no point in going to your insurance company. You can't do it. So where do they go? They go to the independent garages that provide the majority of our referrals. So this is a direct capture business model. I'll come on to that in a minute, with operating margins in excess of 20%. There's no statute on this, but we have 4 Supreme Court decisions based on the common law principle you must treat your victim as you find him. So if somebody is deprived of their vehicle through no fault of their own, and their only option is to hire a vehicle which is expensive, that is not their fault, and the other side's insurance company is going to be liable. Our numbers, we're in that difficult period because our full year numbers are coming out in May. So our interim numbers up to June last year are fairly historic. But just to be clear, we had PBT of 8.9 million, earnings per share of 6.1, and we did pay a dividend of a halfpenny. So just quickly, the business overview, we have two sides of the business, the credit hire division, which is called Edge, and we do four-wheel vehicles, we do motorbikes, and we do a small number of bicycles. The majority of our business now is motorbikes. We're about 2/3 motorbikes at the moment. And we have a sales network that goes around about 1,150 local body shops. This is what my chairman calls Fred in a shed. So it's two blokes with an inspection pit and a tin of small figure. I'm sure you've got one, I certainly have. And they go to them because they can't go to their insurance company, and they ask, what can I do to get my vehicle back on the road? If it's one of our introducer garages, then they're in luck because they will say to them, well, talk to Anexo, and we will provide them with a replacement vehicle, and we'll look after them all the way up to the moment when they get the repaired vehicle back, or as I say, they get the cheque for the insurance company for the written off value. So what happens with the insurance company? We write to the insurance company and say, you owe us this money for repair, or this vehicle is a write-off and our client is on a hire vehicle until you pay up. The insurance company invariably ignores us because that's what insurance companies do. They're interested in protecting their balance sheets and their cash, so they're not interested in paying up. Rather than send them increasingly desperate begging letters saying, please will you pay us, it's very straightforward. We pass the case to our in-house legal services division, which is a wholly owned firm of solicitors called Bond Turner, and it's very straightforward. We issue a writ, and that's how we get our money. So ultimately, we will pursue the other side's insurance company all the way through to a court case. More often than not, we settle before or on the steps of the court case. 98% of our cases settle before they go to court, and of the ones that go to court, we win 98% of the cases that do. So just to be clear, that's a good example. Road traffic accident, they're not at fault motorist, doesn't want to go to his insurance company for obvious reasons, goes to direct capture, it comes to us, we pursue it all the way through the court process to judgment or settlement. And that's the difference between the standard and the Anexo insurance process. If you go to your insurance company, they may or may not give you a car, but they won't give you the kind of car you want, and they won't give you the car you want for the amount of time you need it for. Quite often they'll give you, I remember years ago having a people carrier and having an accident in it, and I was given a Renault Clio, which fitting a family of 6 and a dog in is quite a difficult thing to do. So they don't always look after their customer in that sense. Whereas we, as I say, go directly through from the garage right the way through to the end of the process. So those are our differentiators, really. We're targeting the impecunious market, cars, motorbikes and cycles. And we have in-house screening for this, so we make sure that, we believe that this is a case that we can win. It's either a straightforward admission of fault or we believe that the evidence supports the case. We then look at the financial situation of our customer to see what sort of state he's in terms of whether or not he's got any cash. And there are good examples either way of that. And as I say, we have a less than 2% failure rate where litigation actually comes to court. So just to counter through these, because as I say, they're fairly out of date, you can see all the numbers on the right-hand side. We've got gratifying plus numbers in front of them. We have been a growth business over the last few years, and we continue to pay a dividend. We pay a dividend of a halfpenny. We did a penny and a half for the full year in 2020. We invest cash in the business, so we had a net cash outflow of 6.8 million. We are a growth business, so as the cash comes in from the legal settlements, that gets recycled and reinvested on putting more vehicles on the road. So this is the way we manage our business. We have a series of KPIs. I guess the important ones to look at are the number of vehicles on hire for the average period and also at the period end. Don't forget, this is through a period where we've had lockdowns, and I'll show you in a minute on a graph that the number of vehicles went down quite markedly at the start of both our national lockdowns and then recovered extremely strongly after that. We measure the number of hire cases we settle and the cash collections we get from that as against the number of new cases funded. And in order to fund the number of new cases we're putting on, and these cases are growing all the time, in 2019 we put about 6,000 vehicles on the road, 2020 7,000, last year it'll be closer to 9, I would suggest. So there's growth all the time, and in order to do that we need more legal bums on seats. So we've been increasing the number of people we've hired on the legal services division. We now run 3 offices, one in Liverpool, which is where our head office is. We've got a big office in Bolton, and at the beginning of last year we opened a smaller office in Leeds. This is a really good way of looking at how vehicle numbers have varied given the amounts of lockdown we've had. And you'll see at the beginning of the first lockdown in March 2020, the number of vehicles on the road dropped quite sharply. Under normal circumstances, we put about 150 vehicles on the road a week. In the first week of lockdown, I think that number went down to about 45. So there was a major drop in it. But you see that recover extremely strongly. And that also works for the second lockdown. Why is that? Because, as I say, the majority of our business is motorcycle business, and the majority of our customers are essential workers or working in some sort of service industry which was operational throughout the pandemic. All of you, I'm sure, have seen a huge rise in the number of motorcycle couriers on the road. People are getting everything delivered, everything from Amazon to groceries to takeaways, delivery, whatever it may happen to be. These people are all potentially our customers because they're people who are working gig economy, delivering stuff, they're doing it more or less cash in hand. They need to work or else they can't eat. So if their vehicle gets off the road, it's really important to them that it gets back on the road as quickly as possible. So if it can be said, we have had a good pandemic. We've been open throughout because both our businesses are essential under government guidelines. And you'll see the vehicles at the end of the year have risen 26%, up at 1,700. I'll come to current trading in a minute. We put out a trading statement towards the tail end of last month. You can see a similar thing in terms of claims funded and cash collections. We saw a drop as the first lockdown took hold, and a smaller drop as the second lockdown went, and similarly with quarterly cash collections. But once again, there's been a strong recovery in those. And this shows just purely in a bar chart as the way in which new hire cases have been growing, and also case settlements have been growing. It's important that we have the flexibility to settle cases as and when we feel appropriate, so they don't always go to court. Quite often we will settle a case before we go to court because we would like to get the cash in to recycle into our vehicle fleet. Number of lawyers has been continuing to grow. As I say, the Leeds office is now fully operational. I think we've got about 50 people there. We've got a couple of hundred in Bolton, about the same number in Liverpool. So we are turning into a decent-sized business. So I guess this is the crucial slide, really, which I'd like to spend a little bit of time over. This is our trading update we put on the 18th of January. So we've had record numbers of vehicles on the road in the last quarter of 2021. And that's a function of people coming out of lockdown, more and more of these motorcycles getting on the road and delivering stuff. So we peaked at 2,500, and that was quite rich, really. One of the issues with that is, can we get hold of enough motorbikes? We've basically been buying every motorbike 125cc and below that's coming into the UK. We're Yamaha's biggest customer in Europe, and basically if anybody else wanted a Yamaha in the last half of last year, I'm very sorry, but they weren't going to get one because we nicked the lot. So that means that our current vehicle numbers have just come off a little bit and standing at 2,300. But if you remember the previous slide where we are averaging 1,400 over the first half of last year and 1,700 at the end of the first half, you'll see there's a massive increase in the amount of business that we're doing. Now, I've said before that historically, we've looked at direct capture, which is getting business directly from the impecunious motorist who goes to his garage and says, look, I've got a problem, can you help? For the first time, we're now getting referral business from a major insurance broker. So at the tail end of last year, we signed a major new agreement with MCE Insurance. They're one of the biggest motorbike insurance brokers in the UK. That means we're now handling all their non-fault business. So every time one of their customers gets involved in a crash which is not their fault, we handle that business. So that's a major new string to our bow. Just to give you an example, if, as I say, last year we'd be looking at putting roughly 9,000 vehicles on the road for the course of the year, then MCE potentially is about another 200, 250 vehicles and possibly 300 by the end of this year. So that's a major increase in the number of vehicles to be put on the road. Not all of those are going to be an exact addition to what we've got, but what it does mean is that if we have a potentially contentious case at one end, where it's a he said, she said case, or we're not absolutely sure there's an at-fault thing, we might decline to take that case on, and we're more likely to take on an MCE case, which is a higher value case for us, and I think possibly could be regarded as being higher quality. It's important to bear in mind that we turn away about 50% of the cases that were offered. So out of those 9,000 vehicles, we would have turned away about another 9,000. Either because the economics didn't work for us, maybe it's an expensive car, it'll cost £15,000 to repair, that's not a particularly effective use of our working capital, or perhaps it was a case where we didn't feel that if it went to court, we would necessarily have a clear-cut case, perhaps it's a case that's been disputed. So really that's a big thing for us. The courts have been causing difficulties because they've been shut during COVID. A lot of settlements have been done via Zoom or via the telephone, and that's fine to a certain extent. My chairman, who's a barrister himself, points out that sometimes some of the judiciary are not terribly good with modern technology, and so Zoom's proved a problem for some of them. But another thing to bear in mind is if you have a contentious case and you need a witness, then that witness has to appear in person. It's very difficult to do over the phone. So we have seen a lot of cases being delayed or postponed, and that is still happening to a certain extent. That's not a problem for us in the sense that we know that the case is there and we know what money we're going to get out of it because we have the figure to claim from the insurance company. It just means we're waiting a bit longer for it. But that rate of settlement is going to increase as the courts reopen fully. Now, two other things which I wanted to mention. Bond Turner is a legal business. We are litigators. That's what we do for a living. And at the tail end of last year, we launched a housing disrepair division. I don't know how much you're aware of housing disrepair, but at the moment in England and Wales, there are about 4 million people who live in social housing. There are about 4.4, sorry, it's the other way around. No, it isn't. 4 million people who live in social housing, 4.4 million who live in private rental. And a large number of those are living in housing which is substandard. Damp, mould, ineffective heating, the bathrooms don't work, the kitchen is 25 years old and hasn't worked for years. There's a lot of this around. We believe that there are potentially 400,000 claims on this per year. Now, we're just dipping our toe into this, but this is potentially a really, really good business for us. We're getting a lot of our customers through referrals. I mean, ultimately, if you have an impecunious customer who's driving a very low-value car, it's entirely possible that they live in social housing, or which is in some sort of difficulty, and have poor quality housing as well. So we have a lot of people who come to us saying, you've helped me fix my car, can you help the fact that I've got cockroaches in the bathroom? And we do. This is a relatively interesting business for us because it's not very capital intensive. Normally, if we don't get a case internally, then we do pay a marketing fee for the marketing people to get it for us. The only disbursement on top of that really is the surveyor's fee. But the great thing about this is that they settle relatively quickly, so they're not particularly capital intensive, and they're settling within 150, 200 days, let's say, as against our normal cash cycle, which currently stands at about 460 days, because of the length of time it takes to court to get a court date. So it's business where we recover our working capital relatively quickly. I mean, we've been doing it for 3 months. We've taken on over 1,000 cases so far. We settled about 500, and it's really going to grow. So I think this is going to be a significant driver for our revenues in 2022 and beyond. Another thing which you've probably heard of is the VW emissions case, otherwise known as Dieselgate. For anybody who hasn't heard of this, this was an issue with Volkswagen and other motor manufacturers. Their cars had to pass certain emission tests, and they installed a cheat device so that when the cars were tested, it showed that the emissions tests were lower, and therefore they were within legal guidelines, whereas in fact otherwise they would have been higher. bizarrely, when the cheat device was detected, they then installed a cheat device to cheat the cheat device, if you can believe that. Now, Volkswagen have admitted liability and settled in a number of jurisdictions. Off the top of my head, the US, Canada, Brazil, Australia, Germany. The case is still ongoing here. Most recently, they tried to have the case thrown out in the High Court just before Christmas, on the 22nd of December. Once again, their attempt was disallowed. So they have been refused leave to appeal against the High Court decision. There is a trial date set for January 2023. There are no guarantees in this world. We believe that it would be appropriate for Volkswagen to approach the claimants against it this year, as they have done in other jurisdictions, and say, is there any chance of getting a settlement? Because if they go to court, there is always the danger of getting not only the normal damages, but also exemplary damages to effectively teach people a lesson. It's also worth bearing in mind that on top of the VW case, we've got potential claims against pretty much every other manufacturer. At the moment, we're looking at Mercedes, BMW, Jaguar, Land Rover, Renault, and so on. We have about 15,000 cases in VW. It's not appropriate for me to give an estimate of what we think it would be worth to us out of this, but it is several £1,000s. You multiply that by the number of claims we've got, and it becomes a potentially very significant earner for the firm. It's worth bearing in mind that all the work that goes into processing these cases gets expensed through the P&L, because it's in the normal monthly wage of the legal experts that we have working on it. Therefore, any money that comes in effectively comes in as an exceptional item. We've got our final numbers for 2021 coming out on the 11th of May. But as I say, broadly speaking, it's been a really interesting time for us. As I say, our offices were open throughout. We kept putting vehicles on the road. We had our people working from home for a while. We kept the office open 24 hours a day. So if people needed to come in and get files, and you can imagine as a legal business, we generate a ton of paper. But we've had our people coming in at 2 o'clock in the morning, picking up files and going home to carry on working from them at home. Everybody's now back in the office, so the amount of case settlements, the amount of casework is increasing. But this is a business that we believe has very considerable growth potential from here. We make no bones about the fact that that's what we're looking for. I do have some numbers on this. There is a presentation which will be available for you as you leave. And to be honest, I don't propose to go through these in a huge amount of detail. But that is basically the story. Now, I'm slightly embarrassed about this because I have to fly home tonight, which is a change of plan, so I won't be able to come for the sandwiches and the Chardonnay afterwards. And I feel rather guilty for these other gentlemen because they've had to listen to mine, and I don't get to listen to theirs. But I wondered if anybody had any questions. Now's probably as good a time to take them as any. And the other thing I would stress, obviously, is that my number's on the website, and if you've got any queries that I can't answer tonight, which perhaps because I can't or perhaps because I don't know the answer, then we're happy to help out in the future. We have a team of about 30 salespeople covering England and Wales, and basically they're going around all the independent garages. The advantage for the garages is that they get paid in full and on time, so it's great for their cash flow, it's great for their customer satisfaction, the customer thinks they're a rock star, and they get a lot of business from recommendation, because you can imagine the word spreads pretty quickly. In some cases we can pay a marketing fee, but not all. But basically, from their cash flow perspective, it means that they don't have to argue with an insurance company, wait 9 months, and then perhaps settle for less than they wanted. In terms of the share price, I mean, we floated in June 2018 at £1. We've been up as high as £2. We're currently at around about the 148, 149 level. We were stuck at 125 for quite some time. We did a small cash raise about 18 months ago at 125. You should be aware of the fact that we received a takeover approach last year from a private equity fund called DBay, who own 29% of our stock, and they made an offer of £1.50 per share for the company. I can't comment on that, except that they did their DD and so on. The board, I don't think, was ever going to feel that £1.50 was an appropriate price for the shares, and so the bid fell away. We believe that subsequent to the most recent trading update and the various bits of news we've had, the MCE deal, the housing disrepair announcement, and so on, the share price has been on the move again, and we seem to have got out of the doldrums. We're trading in the 140s at the moment. I think on valuations, if you look at what analysts' forecasts are, then we are not expensive. I mean, it's interesting where we open our offices, because ultimately our head office is in Liverpool.
Yeah.
We looked at opening an office elsewhere. We picked on Bolton. We tend to open our offices where there is a big insurance presence,
Sure.
because where there's an insurance company, there's a defendant solicitor who works for the insurance company, and a lot of our employees used to work for the defendant solicitor. So
Right.
it's quite an attractive proposition for us. We can go to these people and say, do you want to fancy coming over to the other side? They have the expertise already.
Yeah.
We can, let's face it, deprive our competition of some of their better people. And because our margins are better, we can offer a more attractive package.
Sure.
So we open in Leeds. I would suggest if we were going to open an office elsewhere, then it would be somewhere else where there is an existing insurance presence.
Right, that makes sense.
The cars are not falling away. It's from a motorbike is much more likely to be written off, and a write-off is more valuable for us, because with a repair job, which takes, let's say, 4 to 6 weeks, at the end of the 6 weeks, the guy gets his vehicle back, and that is the claim finished. If it's a write-off, he is on his vehicle until such time as the insurance company gives him a check for the write-off value, which can take many months. And in the meantime, every day, he's riding around in one of our vehicles. So that tends to work better, because if a £500 motorbike gets knocked down the road, it's going to be a write-off. Nobody's going to repair that. So there's a much higher proportion of write-offs with motorbikes. It's also fair to say, and it's not what we do predominantly, but with a motorbike, if you get knocked off a motorbike, it's much more likely that you're going to be injured. So there are elements of personal injury there. We're not personal injury chasers. It's always been an adjunct to our work, but there's more personal injury from a motorbike crash than there is from a car crash. And finally, just the other thing is, when you do have a repair, a car repair can be expensive. So we are always looking to get the best bang for our buck that we can out of our working capital. Yeah, I mean, there's been such an explosion in deliveries across the UK. Last year, Delivery put out a statement to say they were expanding in 100 different towns across the UK. And I'm trying to remember, the one I remember is Yeovil in Somerset, probably because it was the last one on the list. But, they're places that, populations of, 15, 20,000 people. Wherever there's a student population, there are going to be people who want pizza at 2 o'clock in the morning. And, it has been a huge thing. And these are people absolutely working in the gig economy. We have 17 interpreters working on the staff, because a lot of these people are foreign nationals. I think there's an amazing statistic somebody told me, that 80% of courier riders in London are Brazilian, because that's just, one person gets how it works, the diaspora, one person gets a job at doing something and immediately the word goes out and everybody else does it. So these people are, if they don't work, they don't eat. So, we believe, particularly in housing disrepair, we believe that there is an element of social good in this. I feel very strongly, actually, that if, for instance, somebody taking their children to school can't do so because her car has been damaged beyond repair, why should she have to take her children to school on the bus? But secondly, in terms of housing disrepair, you may have seen there was a documentary on television not that long ago, and some of the conditions that these people live in. This is social housing. This is run by for-profit companies who are getting contracts with local authorities, and it's in shocking condition, and that's not acceptable. That can happen. I mean, it depends how much. Can bike riders be badly injured? It's a fair point. I mean, the statistic I heard is that since the MCE contract, which started at the beginning of last year, we've had 15 serious injuries of riders, of which 7, I think, have been fatalities. Now, these are legal cases which involve, many hundreds of thousands of pounds of claims, and it's very unfortunate. Quite often, if you're riding a courier bike in an urban area, then you hope that when you get knocked off, it's not going to be that awful. It's not like you're doing 70 miles an hour on the motorway. It's an urban injury, so somebody will clip you coming out of a side street. I take your point on it. The other thing to bear in mind is, of course, that some of the claim also involves things like personal effects. So a set of motorcycle leathers is about £300, I'm told. I personally don't have any. And why should you have to repay those out of your own pocket? But by the same token, the motorcycle leathers, which are designed to let you skid along the ground, will hopefully save you from serious injury. No, not really. We had a bit of a hiccup in terms of delivery, because Yamaha had a big fire at their plant in, I think, Indonesia, either Indonesia or the Philippines. But basically, we just went out and bought other marks. So actually, we're now heavily engaged in other bike models as well. I mean, we buy a lot of these, you know, and basically any we buy the 125cc bikes outright with an element of HP. Anything above that, and all the cars are on lease, so that's a separate thing. We're not interested in second-hand metal prices. But the bikes we buy, and the turnover is pretty high. You know, you can buy a bike and it can probably be damaged, you know, within a few weeks. But no, we've not had a particular difficulty in that. Okay, somebody shunts you in a traffic jam, you can come to us. If we believe it's an at-fault accident, we will give you a vehicle. We then look at your financial background, which includes your stocks and shares and what's in your bank account and how many credit cards you have. If you are not impecunious, then actually there's every chance we might sit there and say, well, we've got the claim and we're happy to do the claim, but do you know what, we'll settle quickly with the insurance company. Because if it goes all the way to court, the judge will sit there and say, well, you can't really charge him those credit hire rates because actually he's got money in the bank. It's interesting, there are two different examples here which we use. There was one around Float, which was a pilot for British Airways, I believe. So he was earning, you know, £150,000 a year. So on paper, it looked as though he would not be impecunious. But 2 divorces, 6 children, and he actually was impecunious. So he was fine. We could take him on. The other example is a kid who's a trainee plumber. Let's say he's 19. You know, he's an apprentice plumber. You would have thought he's impecunious, but do you know what? He lives with his mum and dad. He's been saving his wages. You look at his bank account. He's got £8,000 in it. So for us, that's a case we'll take on, but we'll settle that case because ultimately he could, if he wanted to, have gone to the hire company and said, do you know what? Or he could have bought himself a banger for £500 to ride around. You know, those are the options he has. It's worth bearing in mind, incidentally, that our credit hire rates are higher than commercial than spot rate, as I've said before. But if you see a spot rate advertised by Budget, you know, hire a car for £35 a day. That means if you're going on holiday in 6 weeks' time and you book it online, you'll get it for £35 a day. If you walk into Budget and say, I need to drive a car off the forecourt now, it's going to be 5 times that figure. So we keep a very close eye on what credit hire rates and what spot rates are doing. And we've never had a case where a judge has said, your rates are egregiously high. So we make sure that our credit hire rates, although they're high, are not high enough to be effectively offensive. Insurance companies argue against this all the time, and all the time they lose. That's why we are a successful business.